Lauren. Oh, right. I feel like I'm the teacher in Matilda right now. I don't know why.
Which one?
The main one. I'm about to make a really terrible announcement. Someone's gonna have to eat a whole chocolate cake. Okay, here we go. Welcome, everybody. Some of you we knew, some of you we do not know. For those of you who are new, I'm Lauren. My partner is Kat. We are Paradise Palace. We run a project space in Brooklyn, and we also do a lot of really fun programs. And one of them is this. It's called Artist Curated Cinema. It's a bi-weekly program that we have here at Bazaar, and it marries an artist talk and a film screening. It's really fun. And tonight we have the fabulous Grant Stoops. He's a Brooklyn-based painter, and he does a lot of different things, but he presents his paintings, and he's going to tell us all sorts of good stuff about it. So, and then after that, we're going to screen the film Pontypool. It's a 2008 Canadian B-horror film about zombies. And the main character's name is also Grant, which is very interesting. And I feel like you did that on purpose. You chose that on purpose for that. Okay, cool. I'm going to pass it along to Grant, and he's going to chat about his work.
Yeah.
Do I just press a button?
You just click next.
What's
Click the little
next?
arrow.
Oh.
Yeah,
All
right
right.
there.
All right, well, I won't do it now.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Now it doesn't want to
Space
work.
bar?
Oh no, what happened?
Oh no.
Oh no. Oh no, it froze.
Oh, you
Okay.
click.
Yes.
There it goes.
Arrow
We just needed
buttons.
to be reminded that it was active.
All
That's
right. So, my name is Grant. I am a painter. I started this kind of weird process several years ago due to a kind of natural shyness and maybe also a predilection towards not leaving the house, in which I wanted to make kind of old masters paintings or paintings with people in them, but not actually use real people. So I started making these kind of like weird little clay sculptures and then making paintings based off of them. This is from what feels like a million years ago, but was only maybe like 6 or 7 years ago. And you know, like, well, anyway, all right. So yeah, this is this is kind of the basic idea. Like I, wanted to try portraiture, but not really sort of deal with the kind of, messiness of having like a real human being in front of me. Or, it was a nice way to sort of kind of test things out. So these are actually kind of small little guys. But much bigger than the original, which is sort of maybe action figure size. If you can kind of maybe get an idea of the scale here, is there a mouse? Yeah, that's like a thumbprint. And then this is the final product.
What's like the dimensions of the painting?
Oh yeah, this is like page size, like maybe like 8 by 12 or something like that. But anyway, it started almost kind of as like kind of not like I won't go as far as to saying it's like a joke, but it was sort of just it was a very trivial thing at first, and as I kind of time went along, it sort of got progressively like bigger and bigger. Like I kept kind of changing colors and things. Like these are more kind of these portraits. Like this is just, and then and occasionally not being like a sculptor guy myself, like things sort of fell apart a little bit, or I didn't really know how to make it, but it ended up also being, this just was the properties of whoever they ended up being kind of characters into themselves. But things really began to take a turn when I discovered this kind of wax clay, and I discovered this kind of like process of using heat and like heat guns and soldering irons and stuff to sort of melt stuff into features, and slowly kind of get it away a little bit further away from just like portraits of people that don't exist. And then I started making bigger and bigger stuff. Like this is almost like kind of life size. It's the whole thing is maybe 4 foot by 4 foot. And then I discovered that I really kind of like this like weird clowny guy. So I made a mold of him, and then made him out of a plastic thing, and made this like painting of what his immortal soul looks like on the inside. Which is a little dark, but.
That's a painting, right?
Yeah. So these are all paintings. So yeah, and as all of our souls probably reside in total darkness, and the light emanating from within or whatnot.
Is that resin?
It is kind of a gelatin, and I don't really remember the name of it. It's something very generic, like composimold or instamold or moldomorph or something like that.
Do you have an idea of like face that you think might emerge as you like making it?
Well, there's a weird thing where with when you make kind of anything, you end up discovering if you're thinking about it sort of sensitively enough that like in the same way that people see faces in clouds or in shit in the floor on the wall of a dentist's office or something, faces are the first thing that pops out, and there's like a particular organ in the brain that does this, and there's like a name for it, and I never remember what the name is, but everybody has this sort of intuitive thing. So working with clay, especially with like weird wax stuff that is kind of constantly falling apart, like that happens really quickly, and so the expressions that you end up getting are usually like kind of extreme. In this case, sort of a happy scream or something like that.
Some potential show titles.
Yeah.
Happy Scream.
And then I started making these kind of like backgrounds for them, that maybe they lived in this kind of like sort of like pre-Genesis kind of world, and I made a mold of that first clown guy, and I kind of copied him because I liked sort of his face, I'll give him a few different limbs or things like that. And in trying to look for justifications for doing this work, I come up with all these kind of like very dumb fictions. Like I remember reading that like in sort of the first drafts of the Bible, Genesis. And actually, I think it might even still be in there or not, but it said that in like the very first couple lines, which is as far as I ever get reading the Bible, but in the first couple lines, it's like God hovered over like the waters, and that was like a borrowed kind of theological term from like the Egyptians or Babylonians, where they described the world not as like outer space like we see it, but as a giant like huge ocean, and they call that the waters of chaos, which is just kind of like a blank slate. And if you lived in some of these like early, prehistoric or Mediterranean societies, like you would view kind of your surroundings as like land, and then nothingness was not outer space, but it was like water. It was like ocean. So it's that kind of weird. And when you're making dumb little sculptures, and like you want to denote that kind of like blank space, or when you think about it, yourself, it really started to make a lot of sense to me that they would live in kind of this like field of water. Anyway, and then I started kind of doing a little bit more stuff with like lighting, and like this is one of them kind of like emerging out of some kind of darkness, and one of the arms has kind of fallen off. And then looking at a lot of these like older paintings, I realized that they do kind of the same motifs. We call them motifs, but I kind of have always looked at that stuff as like a lot of the old masters were bound by their era, in which they had to make either religious paintings or they had to make like mythological paintings. Like they were like, well, I'm really into like muscular dudes, but I can't just paint a muscular dude. That can't just be it. There has to be like an excuse kind of given for it. And I'm operating kind of from the inverse of that procedure, where I'm like, well, I like this idea that these people have painted, and the Rubens thing was always like painting like Hercules wrestling the Nemean lion, and he was allowed to paint Hercules because that was a myth that everyone kind of understood, and no one would ask any questions. But I think he really just wanted to paint like guys wrestling. And I don't mean that in like a dismissive way. Like I think that's totally okay, and I think we're kind of blessed to live in this era in which we can kind of operate like that. So I made this kind of wrestler, kind of Hercules guy. I mean, he's fucking up when I don't know some other critter kind of guy. And I really like this guy too, because it was this like he's this like. This is how kind of musculature works. If you don't really think about it, it's just like a bunch of bulging things, And it's a really doing art stuff and doing the kind of painting which is like little it's not big arm movements, but it's like little tiny wrist movements. Like it's really nice to get away from having to think about anatomy and like having to be accurate about these things. So yeah, he's kind of a muscular guy, and I personally can't tell. And the stuff I really love and kind of look for is like, I can't tell whether this, like here is his eye or his eyebrow, maybe this is his eye underneath. To me, this is definitely his mouth, these are his arms, but I can't tell whether this is what he looks out of, or maybe this is like a do-rag. But either one may work. And then kind of bringing in more background stuff as I'm getting a little more comfortable with this kind of like sculptural landscape thing. So he's wrestling kind of a gelatin guy. He's already fucked up this lady.
Is it oil? Is it oil?
Yeah.
How big is this one?
Oh, this one's like 7 foot tall. And then these are dried flowers, or dead flowers, or in this dimension, like I said, they're alive trees.
I feel like you get a lot of narrative out of just like really distorted forms. Like there's,
Oh, thanks.
if you like really like kind of like zero in on it, and there's not, just like picking apart little forms, but like there's a narrative. It's weird.
Oh,
Like,
thanks.
somehow there's like a narrative.
Yeah.
Do you think about a narrative when you're making your stuff?
Well, I start at the very beginning, but it's kind of like I have this process because I was this kind of painter before, and this is the kind of stuff that sort of came natural to me. So it's kind of like it's like in the cartoons in which like when like or maybe Charlie Chaplin or something, when someone gets in a factory, they accidentally fall on the conveyor belt, and then they get turned into the product. Whereas I have kind of like a dumb idea of some kind, and then the process, the factory is like how I know how to make paintings, and it gets churned into this kind of thing, But I think in some weird way, that's how like most art people kind of make things, But I'm trying. I kind of take it a little bit more literally, because it's easier than leaving the house and and painting human beings or real situations, real people. And stuff.
This one's so casual though.
Yeah,
The last one was like
yeah.
really intense.
I was thinking about this one, like the lamp that I used to light them kind of just felt like a sun, and it just kind of felt like sort of a nice day, So yeah, he seemed a little suspicious in some way to me. That's a weird counter to this. And I don't know. I mean, anyway. And then I'm getting a little more, this one, which is probably not even totally finished yet. You can see it's still a little rough here. I'm starting to make a little bit more of the backgrounds and change these guys around a little bit more. I think this one I was really just kind of, this is a big one too. I think it's bigger than what the image projected on here is. I think I was just stressed out about a relationship, you know, and kind of wanted to like mirror that in this guy. Being weirdly abandoned on an organ in the middle of the sea. But then finally, like this is finally kind of what I'm getting into, is just making the background more and more, and making it this bigger giant thing. The real painting is maybe just a hair smaller than this projected size here is. But there's this there's this thing I kind of want to get into in the future, is that like a lot of, there's this time period, and I'm not a real historian or a real scholar in any of this stuff. I went to art school, which is not like a real college. Like, it's not rigorous. You just have to show up in it, and you get as much out of it as you kind of like are interested in it. But a lot of the earliest kind of landscapes, what I really liked about them, like from the Renaissance period and like kind of from the medieval period, they were still operating under those like painterly rules in which like you have to kind of have an excuse to do the painting. You might really want to do a landscape, you might really like love nature and all these things, but whether it was the church or the person who was commissioning you or the prince or the locality or whatever it is, there was some kind of reason that you had to put like a person in there. So you weren't allowed as a painter to make just land. And I sort of really enjoy that idea, because now I like the inverted thing of that idea, in which like none of this stuff makes sense until you put like this like a person in it, you know. This is just organs, you know. This is sort of nothing. But you give a little guy like a place to live in it, and then like it activates the rest of it, you know. And we're not, you know, we're looking at stuff, paintings from like the other end of it, where any of us can look at a picture of a landscape and be like, oh, that's really beautiful. But like, I really like the idea that there was a time in which like people just didn't like, they didn't look outside and think like, oh, it's beautiful. They needed to see like a little person in there, or else they'd be like, you know, why the fuck am I looking at a painting of trees? You know. Anyway.
What's the scale on this?
This is about the same size as it is on the screen here, maybe a little smaller. But yeah, this is what I'm getting into. I have some more stuff that isn't quite.
So you feel like those surroundings, like what's around the figure is more. There's more to be like learned there, or discovered there.
Well, no. I think that like what happens is.
But you still put the figure in.
Yeah, I think you have to, and I think that you kind of have to do those things in order to activate weird sort of spaces. Like if I was just to show you like abstract pieces of clay that were just kind of crushed with my hand, like you can't go on that journey yourself to like think of it as another dimension, another space, a real person, anything that happens to them. You can't even think of it as a metaphor. You can just think of it as like, oh, this guy can paint clay really well, you know. It's like not, you know, but it's sort of, you know, like I want to be able to do that, like that kind of next step, whatever that is, in which like you can make kind of meaningless stuff into meaning. Like the meaning is that, and this is good because this is the last slide. But this. You know, Pontypool and the guy and the movie that is this, the guy that made it was like a frustrated artist too, and he like based it a lot on like weird art theory about how like meaning exists outside of nature, and that it like lives beyond or before, more than beyond, like the actual physical world, and that's kind of what I'm sort of interested in doing in my own stuff, is that like it is like. How far you can do just like one weird little. Yeah. Oh yeah. No. I'm about. This is about it. I think. I forgot what he said.
I'm so sorry. You're talking about the director of Pontypool and meaning before.
Yeah. Well, that, and I think we all kind of agree that like agree about this is that we don't like. It would be horrifying to the idea that like